Hey guys, it's Andrew here from safetyontap.com. I find myself driving to the airport at the moment. The reason why I'm driving, why I'm travelling, is because I'm going to help a client with some workshops that I'm facilitating at the moment, and I find myself facilitating and spending time in structured group activities and speaking at conferences in particular a fair bit at the moment. And there's a number of conferences coming up that I'm speaking at as well as emceeing. And I thought it was really timely to make a video for you because I had a coaching call with someone this morning, and the challenge that they had was really timely in relation to that conference sort of stuff. And their challenge was to prepare for an amazing conference presentation that they were delivering. So I thought I'd make a little video, I'm not sure how long it'll be, along my journey to the airport, which kind of describes the journey that we could take as we go from idea about a conference presentation to the actual delivery of an amazing conference presentation. Now, this hopefully will be helpful for anyone who wants to speak at a conference, obviously, but anyone who needs to get up in front of a group, a large-ish group, so not kind of a meeting, larger than a meeting, and have an opportunity to prepare what they're going to talk about, then this will be helpful for you. Stay tuned. Okay, so first things first. The question that I ask at the beginning of any of these discussions, or that I ask myself when I think about spending time with a group, is what is the difference that I'm trying to make in the lives of the people who will be hearing my message, who will be spending time with me in the conference presentation or workshop or whatever. Now, that's two really important components. Who is it that I'm spending time with? We need to make sure that we understand who they are, what their interests are, what their backgrounds are, why they're going to be in that room in the first place, and what difference are we trying to make? And difference is the important thing, because we're not just trying to make an impact when we speak, when we communicate. We're not just trying to make people feel good. A difference is something more substantial. A difference is helping people move from where they are now to where they could be, a better kind of place. So that's the first and most important question, is what difference are we trying to make to the people who we're going to be spending time with? Sometimes what happens when we get asked to speak, or where we have an opportunity to speak to a group of people, it either goes like this. Here's your topic. Can you talk about this? Or I want you to talk about this. We get given something, we get given a constraint or an objective or the difference that someone else wants us to try and make with the group of people we're talking to. And that can be tricky, but that's okay if we start with something. Or the other, which I think is probably more common, is they say, here is 40 minutes, or here is an hour, or here is 15 minutes. Off you go, use it how you wish. And so, whilst that might not be a helpful way to start, and that most important question around what difference are we trying to make to the people who we're spending time with? That's always the first question. But we need to next work with what constraints we've got. Sometimes the constraint is what we've been asked to do, and always the constraint is how much time have we got. So in the coaching call this morning, after we'd worked out what the difference this person was trying to make to the audience in the room that they're going to be spending time with, we then worked out the time constraint. 40-minute presentation. In 40 minutes, my general rule of thumb, the way that I would approach it with live presentations, is that you can deliver really well three main points, three main pieces of content or ideas or concepts in 40 minutes. So if you break that down, that's 5 minutes for a bit of an introduction, or 5 minutes if you assume that they're potentially not going to be on time, which is reasonable for you to do. 5 minutes intro, 10 minutes first point, 10 minutes second point, 10 minutes third point, and then you've got 5 minutes to wrap up. You can adjust the timing if you like, but the key takeaway there is in about 40 minutes, you've only got 3 key points. Now, whatever time you've got, if it's 90 minutes or 2 hours or a day or whatever, it's important for you to work on how can you chunk up the time that you've got into meaningful, manageable, digestible chunks. That's really, really important to make sure you get clear on. Okay, so we're in a long-term car park now. Long-term's always a better option, even for a short trip, because it's always cheaper and it forces you to go for a walk. I should say in the background, let's do this. Can we see? There should be up the back there, there's a toll freight plane. I'll put a photo in the video of a much larger plane. In fact, the largest plane in the world, which was parked here just last week at Adelaide Airport, which might be interesting. My kids were pretty impressed with the size of it. It came to Adelaide and it had a bunch of army tanks in it. In any case, what are we up to? We've got our 3 key points on our presentation. So we know what we're going to talk about. We've got containers, if you like, of how we're going to fill it in. So when we think about the structure of each of our key points, the first thing that we've got to start with, or that I start with, and that we talked about in this coaching call, is story. So story is something that just brings us to life. It brings conversations to life. It brings our memory and so many different parts of our brain to life when we're hearing stories or when we're telling stories. It's kind of a process that engages both the teller and the hearers of the story. So we need to start with our key points and then have a think about the stories that we can use or that are relevant to those couple of key points. Now, this is often where we get a little bit confused with the traditional ways of doing presentations. So in this coaching call, this person defaulted to the, oh, there's a crossing here, so I'll be back in a sec. Okay, we're back safely across the other side of the road. So story is really important. So this is where we got a little bit confused because case study was the word that came up. Case study, we're going to tell a case study. Now that's excellent because I think lived experience is very, very important for us telling stories. I think it's a great way for you to start thinking about what stories can be told. I think it's a great way to use social proof in terms of influence, actually saying that this is a reality, this is not an idea, this is not theory, this has actually happened, which is really, really helpful. But case studies can be just so boring. And if we use the term case study and if we deliver it like a case study, then it kind of sounds like the way that we've always done it before. So take the case study idea, if you want to do a case study by all means, and tell a story. And when I say tell a story, it's literally the case of me going, of someone going, right, so I was standing up the front and I just froze because this girl, Hayley, had just asked me probably one of the most tough and awkward conversations in a workshop that wasn't already going particularly well. That's the kind of way that we need to tell stories. Now, the thing that people often challenge me on is that, yeah, but that takes a lot of time and it means that I'm not going to be able to actually get to my point. I guarantee you that your point will be made far better if you actually, and it should be stickier, it will be stickier for people who listen to it if you take in, say, 10 minutes, 8 minutes to tell a story and 2 minutes to wrap it up to make your point. So every single one of our points in our conference presentation needs to have a story to begin with. Now stories are great, but they've got to have a point because the stories that our grandparents tell and that other old people, I'm not being ageist here, the stories that people tell who spend far too much time in pubs, some of those stories are great, but if they don't have a point, then it's not going to actually help us make a difference with someone. Might make them feel good while they hear the story or have a laugh or whatever, but we want to go a little bit further than that. So when we think about our story, we've got to have a think about what's the moral of the story, what's the point? How does it fit in with the key message or the key chunk, if you like, of information we're trying to deliver in our presentation? So start with the story, then we think about what's the point or the moral of the story. And then once we've got those two things, then my recommendation is that you start to have a think about visuals. So you can tell a story using visuals really, really effectively. And by that I mean use lots and lots of slides, lots and lots of pictures to bring it to life. This is maybe where some of your case study information comes through. If it's people you're talking about, put pictures of real people. Ask permission, obviously. You don't need lots of words for this because people will be hooked on the story that you're actually telling. Now at this point in time, talking about the presentation in the coaching call, this person said, oh yeah, no, well, I just need to make sure that we keep the slide deck really lean, you know, not many slides at all. Now, my view on that is that that works really, really well if you're going to do a presentation that is really wordy, that's really detail heavy, then you'll want to keep it light. If you're going to be telling stories and you're not going to be using words, then you want to use bucket loads of visuals, bucket loads of photographs and images that actually help to tell your story. And I said, in fact, that in a 40-minute presentation, it's not out of the question for you to have 40 slides. So you to be moving at more than one slide per minute in order for you to be augmenting the story that you're telling with the visuals. And so by engaging people in telling a story and using visuals, You're actually using the two forms of communicating that are far stickier to any human being, believe me, irrespective of their learning style, compared to using text and talking in facts and numbers and things like that. So only now that we've got our stories based around our key couple of points we're making in our presentation, and we've got some visuals to help us tell that story, can we actually start to think about the facts. That's the information that we're going to pull together in order to put the meat on the bones, if you like. But the narrative, the story that you tell, is actually the main structure of your talk. That I find works really, really well. And then we sprinkle facts and information in and around it. Like I said, in a 10-minute slot, in 10-minute kind of point, if you spend 8 minutes telling a story in 2 minutes with the rest of the facts and details, then I think you're going to do really, really well. So finally, we want to make sure that we finish off on the most important bit, which is making the difference for people. So we might have engaged them in our presentation, we might have had some good stories, we might have had some good visuals, but we need to make sure that we finish on them having a takeaway, having something practical, something to take action on that isn't just feeling good. So in this particular coaching call, we agreed that that was going to be, on the basis of this person's experience, a series of do's and do nots in regards to some of the broader kind of activities that they were suggesting people take. Do's and do nots is a great way to do it. How-tos is fantastic. My time again kind of takeaways would be excellent. Getting started points are fantastic too. In any case, whatever way you structure it, you need to have a think about how you're going to finish on each of your key points with what the takeaway is, what the action is, something that's clear and simple and easy enough for people to take action on right now. At the front end and the end and the back end of the presentation, we've got kind of an introduction and a conclusion. And the introduction we talked about serves the purpose of just making sure that the people in the audience think that you're worth listening to. So a little bit of background about you. No one really cares about your qualifications, mostly, but they might be interested about your story and how you came to be there, what your big why is. And then at the back end of your presentation, your conclusion might be you in various different ways, wrapping up the couple of points that you've made, a bit of a summary if you like I just did, of the key structure, the key points, the key takeaways, whatever it might be. And that's your whole presentation. So the next bit is about how do you actually get into that preparation to make sure that that on paper turns into something that's amazing in reality. Now you'll notice that I didn't really talk very much about how that structure, if you like, actually turns into the words that come out of your mouth. And that's particularly important because I find that the planning and the thought and the effort, the time that goes into your structure, if you like, what I just outlined, will get you 90% of the way there. And then the last 10% really depends on each individual person. So what I'm going to tell you is different for the person who I was coaching today and will potentially be different to you. One of the common questions that I get is, do you just do a structure and then do you just wing it from there, just fill in the gaps basically? Or alternatively, and these are not the only two options, but the two common options, do I script out a talk, if you like, so that it's word for word, which then leads to natural questions about how you actually deliver it. So I'll give you my view and then what we talked about in the coaching today. My view is that I change what I do all the time. I actually did a presentation, a conference presentation not long ago where I had the physical script in a room where I never stand behind a podium in my hand the whole time in order to try and keep me to time because it was a 20-minute presentation and I wanted to see if I could stick to that. And it fell totally flat on its face. So that really didn't work for me, the whole scripting process. But scripting in general, I find, actually helps us get really clear in our thoughts, even if we don't use the word-for-word script when we finally deliver our presentation. So that's where it actually serves you in your preparation rather than the delivery of the final presentation. So that's one thing to bear in mind. In the coaching call today, the most important question for me to ask as a coach when the person I was coaching asked me about that question of should they script or should they not, is what's worked well for them in the past before. If they haven't done conference presentations before like this or speaking like this, then it doesn't really matter where you start. You just need to get started and give it a go. In your practice, you might actually find that you'll figure out what's going to work for you or in particular what's not going to work for you. For this person, they had done presentations before where they do the 90% structure and then just deliver. And they've come unstuck on that before, never ever scripted before. So my suggestion was to try the scripting process. That also enables them to do more practice, and that's another thing that they hadn't done a whole lot of before with these types of presentations. So getting your script really clear means that you choose your words really, really carefully, unlike this video that I'm doing, which is unscripted, which is probably a little bit more waffly than it needs to be. So scripting your presentation helps you prepare. Whether you use the script at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. So that's one of the key questions I get around scripting your presentation, or kind of using the structure to go free flow. And then a couple of other questions that we had around preparation is how much should you practice? My view is that if you're going to spend time with a room of people, whether that be 10 people or 20 people or 100 people or 200 or 500 people, which is kind of getting towards the conference presentation end of the spectrum with those larger numbers, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of attention, and arguably a lot of money that's sitting in the room, in the sense of people who've taken the time to stop and listen to you. So my view is you taking the time to prepare for respecting those other people's time is really, really important. So I try to do lots of preparation for my talks. Obviously, the more talks you do, if you do regular kinds of talks or use the same sorts of concepts, then that requires less preparation because mastery starts to come into play. But preparation nonetheless is really, really important. So that's always my suggestion, is to do a dry run. This person today came up with their own idea, solving their own problem of actually recording their presentation on Skype, I think it was, and then sending that round to other people for feedback. They can also do that as a review, and the term that we use is post-match review, kind of like happens in a football match, where you're able to watch back and see things and hear things that you wouldn't have realised were coming out of your mouth, or ways you were behaving when you're actually delivering your practice presentation. And finally, there's some of the logistics aspects. This person in the coaching said that one of their biggest concerns was about making sure that they were ready even if something went wrong. So they had an experience where the notes that they had prepared weren't available. They were on an iPad, I think, and the iPad went missing, and the presentation was really not particularly good, not because they couldn't deliver the presentation, but because they got psyched out, because they felt like that was the crutch, that's what they needed in order to deliver a fantastic presentation. So there's a couple of things that help here. If you prepare, if you practice, then your structure will help you. The visuals will actually help your brain hook into the information that you talk about on each of your visuals, so that helps if you're using a presentation. And also, if in the event that you go and do your talk without your notes, or whatever those notes are, the script or just brief notes, then the amount of practice that you've had will mean that you've got a bit of memory about it. Like it's pretty straightforward. If you've practiced it, then you're going to be more likely to be able to deliver it without the need for your notes. Your notes are always going to help, and sometimes there is a bit of a safety net, but in any case, all that preparation helps you manage that kind of risk. In terms of anchoring onto your presentation, your slides, I find it's always helpful to make sure you've got slides on a USB, slides on a computer, slides in the cloud, that sort of thing, so you've got a bit of backup there. And that's pretty much all of the logistics that I really focus on. So now we've kind of got the bare bones of our conference presentation. We've got what's the difference we're trying to make to the people who we're trying to help, who we're trying to hang out with. We've got our constraints around time. In this instance, it was only time focused as opposed to topic focused. So we know what we're working with there. We know how many key chunks we can break up that time into. Nice announcement there. Our key time chunks, we've got 40-minute presentation in this case, with 3 key points of about 10 minutes each. So 3 key points, work out what those 3 key points are going to be, the most important things that are going to make a difference to your audience. If you only had 3 things that they were going to walk away with, you might be lucky that one of them actually sticks. 3 key points for your structure. Within your structure of each of your points, what you want to be thinking about first of all is, what story can I tell that gets us to an end point, that gets us to a moral of the story or a takeaway if you like. Around your narrative, you want to work out what visual story you can tell if you've got slides. If you don't have slides, then that's fine. That's one less step for you to think about. Using lots of visuals is okay. very, very few words on those, if at all, but you can use words in those presentations where you are using visuals just to kind of delineate the couple of key points that you're trying to make. Once you've got your story, your visuals, then you can start to build in your facts, and your facts are only going to be a small part of that overall narrative, because your narrative starts to carry your message more so than the facts do. And then finally, you've got your takeaways. What are the key, chunky, specific, actionable things that you're going to give to people, that you're going to be generous with, in order that they can walk away from your presentation being able to make a difference in the way that they work, the work that they do, the people that they help. So that's kind of the core basics of our presentation. Now that we've gone through preparation, now that we've gone through practice, you've got structure, you've got story, you've got takeaways, you're going to be ready to help your audience take off into a better version of themselves. I'm on the plane, I'm ready to take off too, so I hope I see you at the next conference, event, or get in touch